we're so glad you're here.
We believe in bringing in experts to inspire and to educate women so that they can live empowered, fulfilled, and successful lives.
When women support women, we change the world. Here we go.
You're going to love this program. So, another podcast session. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today. Tell me, who is it with?
Our guest today is a talented and dynamic attorney, a self-proclaimed extrovert connector, and the mother of 2 young girls, and like many, striving to create harmony in her life. And she's leading the charge personally and professionally to pull other women up with her at her firm, in her community, and in her industry. You know, Barbara, one of the things I love most about Caitlin is that she has just this contagious enthusiasm and her commitment to create strategic boundaries so she can always put her family first while also honoring her professional life. Our guest today is Caitlin Saladrigas.
I knew when you said Caitlin, based on that awesome description, it had to be Caitlin Saladrigas.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, Barbara. Nice to see you.
Great to see you too.
Great to see you as well. Caitlin is a litigation partner at Holland Knight, whose practice focuses on holistic representation of clients with data privacy needs. Her expertise ranges from counseling to class action defense to complex business disputes and government investigations. Caitlin is passionate about the advancement of women and seeks out synergistic opportunities to open doors for them and share their talents and expertise with her clients, her contacts, and her colleagues. Caitlin has served on numerous committees at the National Association of Women Lawyers, the Palm Beach chapter of the association, the Women's Foundation of Florida, and FAU's Honors College. She is a pro bono advocate of victims of domestic violence and is dedicated to mentoring current and aspirational law students. We're so glad to welcome you back to the Women's Forum, Caitlin.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting as I was prepping for our conversation today, it occurred to me that you're one of the original ambassadors of our Women's Forum here in Florida. So I know our community is going to hear great things from you today. So let's jump in. It's also true that you are one of the most energetic and driven women that I have ever met. And you describe yourself again as a social extrovert. Tell us a little bit about that and how it serves you in creating a brilliant life for yourself.
That is a great question, Nancy. And because I'm a lawyer, I feel compelled to answer it in 3 parts. First is really kind of thinking through what a brilliant life actually means. I think that that's going to be entirely subjective. For me, I think that living your brilliant life is really about a mindset and it's less about sort of a destination that you're ever going to arrive at. For me, that mindset is sort of aspirationally trying to have where you're spending your time in your life, whether it's on your work, with your family, in your community, that time investment is consistent with your values, and substantively what you're doing in those areas also being aligned with what your values are. So that's how I would define living a brilliant life. Now, how you live a brilliant life, again, hugely open to interpretation, right? Everybody's going to have different opinions on that. For me, I think it requires a mixture of introspection, thinking about what it is that's really important to you. What are your values, essentially? Then I think the next step, for me at least, has involved a lot of honest self-reflection and thinking about, are these things that I'm doing, are they serving me? Am I getting, not to turn this into a Marie Kondo session, but are they sparking joy for me, right? And I think that that assessment can happen from a work perspective, from a family perspective, from a community, family, like extended family friend perspective. And it's something that it's a process that I have engaged in myself. The question that you asked me specifically is how my personality and my sort of extroverted way of interacting with people assists me or facilitates living that brilliant life or my best life.
Mhm.
And I think that for me, one of my values is to be a helper. I am hardwired to want to help people. And so I think, and that really extends beyond just my family or my friends. It extends into, and it's what motivates me to want to be a mentor. It's what motivates me to want to be a pro bono lawyer for women who are victims of domestic violence. And it's frankly what motivates me every single time I take a call from a client, right? The question that I always ask is, how can I help? Right. And so my personality being very outgoing allows me, I think, to kind of unlock other people's needs. I like to be funny. I think that laughter makes life better. And so I think that that personality style allows me to develop relationships easier, but also helps people to trust me and see me as relatable and open up and let me help where I can help, because I do get a lot of satisfaction personally out of being able to help.
Okay, Caitlin, now I understand your superpower. That alignment of extroversion and introspection and being aligned with values and wanting to help, but sometimes extroverts are all about themselves and their egos and just entertaining people, but that blend really truly makes you authentically help and be strategic and effective. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. My question for you is, inspires you to push beyond the boundaries, to be engaged at such a high level, and to be more of who you can be?
I think inspiration comes from a lot of different places. I have always been very competitive. So I'm in a field that's very competitive, which is a natural good fit for me. It pushes me to pursue excellence in what I do. At the same time, I'm a very dedicated mother and wife, and I know that by pursuing my best efforts in my career, I'm really setting an example for my girls, and I want to be a role model to them. And frankly, I am a role model to them, whether I want to be one or not, right?
Mhm.
It's sort of
Yeah.
like either you're aware of it or you're not aware of it. And once you become aware of it, it's a little terrifying because you're like, there's this audience kind of observing me 24/7, and you want to set a good example. But that, knowing that my girls are watching me is a huge motivator. Um, but like I said earlier, a big piece of it is I personally get a lot of satisfaction about helping people. And that sort of makes it almost selfish, I feel like. But I love my favorite thing to hear after I've been on the phone with a client, for example, is when they say, "I'm so happy I called." Right? That they came with a
Yeah.
problem and we were able to work through it, right? I can share some of my legal experience, talk through what the issues are that they're seeing. And after digesting them, perhaps there's some, follow up research discussion, et cetera. You can get to a point where there's peace, there's
Mhm.
resolution. And that's something that that's fulfilling for me. So I think that, like I said, there's really multiple places that inspiration comes from. But I think they all kind of point towards trying to find that alignment, and really kind of pursuing it wholeheartedly.
So did you have an early role model to help create that lens and mindset?
Not really. No, I didn't. I wouldn't say a single role model, right? I
Uh-huh.
mean,
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with really any lawyers in my family. Um, I didn't. I wasn't exposed to legal careers and the variety of legal careers that exist when I was in college, really in law school is when I first started to learn about the variety of different careers that you could develop in this practice. I think that there have been a few women that I've learned from who have given me really invaluable advice, right? Whether they're the ones that say the morning hours are the best, right? You can steal time if you are logged in early, you get that quiet, deep think time, and you can kind of get out ahead of the day. Great advice, right?
Mhm.
I've had another woman lawyer say to me, you need to be really choosy about where you invest your time outside of work and family because those are such significant demands. And she basically put it this way. She said, you need to involve yourself in organizations that you're willing to lose sleep for because that's what you're giving up. And I thought that that was such great perspective because it makes you really think carefully about how and where you invest your time. So, again, not any one person that I'm sort of emulating, but there have been innumerable people, whether it's my own mother or, various other women and men, frankly, who have led by example or whose careers in some way I look up to, or whose family relationships I see and I think, no, that's something that I think is important, is going to be important for me too.
Those are great points, and I want to pick up on something you mentioned a moment ago, that you're very competitive and that you strive for excellence. And I'm curious, Caitlin, so many of us struggle with perfectionism. Does that is that something that you kind of think about, and how perhaps perfectionism may creep itself into your own life at times?
For sure. I think it's a constant battle, right? I'm going to butcher the saying, but I know there's a saying that's something like, don't let perfect become the enemy of the good, right? And I think that especially in my industry is an ongoing struggle because perfect is better than good in what I do. And I think that what is important, at least what I meditate on, is perfection can be the goal, but let's not, if we don't quite meet it, right? If we get to almost perfect, let's be sort of graceful about that. Let's accept that and not be sort of torn up about a comma, right? Because that's really where I think it becomes self-defeating. But I would be lying if I said that it's not sort of an ongoing struggle, because when you are very ambitious and you aspire to excellence, perfectionism is always kind of hovering right there. And I just try to use it, frankly, I try to use it as a weapon, right? Harness that desire to do things perfectly and turn it on. And then when it's not necessary, to turn it off, right? Because, the kids' craft project doesn't need to be perfect. The house doesn't need to be perfect, right? Things like that are just, they're not necessary. And I think that being able to be mindful of that urge to try to reach perfection and to really kind of focus it so that it doesn't dominate and create, just a lot of anxiety in other parts of your life.
Hmm. Interesting. And I'm curious, between the perfectionism, striving for excellence, and the competitive nature of your personality, is it easy to show yourself grace and find a level of harmony in all of that?
Um, I think that's something that I think I've gotten better at that over time. I think that that's like a muscle,
Right.
that you really have to exercise. For me, you know, finding time away is really critical, right? And that's, when I was saying at the outset that being extremely choosy about how and where you invest your time so that it aligns with your values.
Hmm.
I think that that's really important. I think that if I was doing work that I wasn't intellectually attracted to, right, that I didn't have a personal interest in, that would be really exhausting.
Hmm.
And so there, yes, I want to do excellent, great work and get great outcomes for clients. But I have this extra layer of interest, right? It's areas that I am mentally engaged in. And so I think that helps. Similarly, outside of the work environment, I really do try to kind of keep things somewhat lean.
Hmm.
I have been involved in a number of different boards, but I'm not involved in all of those boards at the same time, right? And each one kind of becomes its own passion project. Um, but I do try to kind of keep a lid on it because the reality is it's a zero sum game, right? We only have
Right.
so much time. We only have like so many hours in a day. And I think that overcommitting myself was something that I learned the hard way about when I was a little bit younger and I was a newer lawyer. Because you want to say yes to everything, you want to do everything really well, and saying yes to doing everything and doing everything really well are sort of
Right.
not mutually consistent things, right?
Right.
Right. So
And so
true.
I feel like I kind of learned that the hard way a few years back, and I try to be mindful of just limiting the commitments and focusing on what I am interested in, because that is in and of itself, it creates excitement and energy for me, and that helps me to balance out, right? I'm not expending energy in ways
Yeah.
that I'm like, this is depleting me, right? I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, it's
Oh,
interesting because when you
lots
say
of
no
sense.
to something, it gives you the power to say yes to something else. And no is a powerful word. So
And
Yeah,
if
Barbara,
we're
you were
Nancy
doing
and
gonna
I,
say?
well, Nancy and I talk about this a lot because she knows that I way overcommit as well.
You?
And so during the pandemic, when there was nothing on the calendar, I was a
Mhm.
little panicked. No, just kidding aside. But on my vision board here that's hanging up for this year, I have it's either a hell yes or a no thank you as a reminder, right? That you have
Mhm.
to be all in because you do have to really measure and value your time so that you have greater capacity to really give it to people and things that matter. I think, when you're especially become a mom and as your kids age, you realize they're so important. I mean, my career
Mhm.
is, and I know your career is too, but other aspects are essential, and you'll turn out to be a better attorney if you have that type of harmony as well.
I completely agree, Barbara. And one of the things that that I like to say, especially to the women that I'm mentoring at the firm that are sort of coming up the ranks, they're thinking about having families. They get concerned that, is this going to make me seem less dedicated? Is this going to impact my ability to grow as a lawyer? And I like to remind them of a couple of things. I think that being a parent, becoming a parent, is incredibly helpful to your development in the legal industry. And I think that perhaps, Barbara, you might agree with me that in your industry that's true as well. I am so much more mindful of other people and their feelings and just being aware of that. I'm also extremely mindful of how important having a schedule is, and just managing logistics. I was aware of logistics before I became a parent, but now I am hyper aware of logistics. If we have a meeting at 11, I'm like, okay, by 10 o'clock, we've got to have talking points. And by 10:30, I need to get at least some buy-in on those talking points. By 10:45, we need to make sure that the coffee is in the conference room, that all the technology is working. And then at 11 o'clock, you're ready to go. It's showtime, right? And I think that, some people maybe just have that innately. But for me, I learned a lot of that taking my kids to school, right? If they have to be there by 8, that means you need to leave by what time? And somebody needs to be reminded to put their shoes on like 17 times before you leave, right? And did you get the backpack? And what about the lunchbox, right? And all of that stuff kind of leads up to then when it's actually showtime. And for me, that's translated into being, I think, being able to be really efficient for my clients. I mean, and not to bore you guys with what's going on in the legal industry right now, but costs are really increasing. And one of the things that I pride myself on is being able to kind of look down the field and say, all right, we're heading in one of a couple different directions. And if we go this way, the most efficient thing that we need to do right now and in the next couple of months is this, this, and this, right? And it allows me, because again, I'm thinking logistically and from a practical perspective, it allows me to kind of create those efficiencies. And I think that those are very valuable. So it's a long way of saying, I think that you're right. I get a lot out of my relationship with my kids personally. But what I think is oftentimes not discussed is how much becoming a parent can really grow you in your own industry as a professional. So that's my
Yeah.
2 cents on that. Mhm.
I agree so much. I remember thinking, God, I wish I had been a mom sooner. I'd be that much better at my work. I agree. There's so many things, and it helps put things in perspective sometimes when you get
Mhm.
too caught
Right.
up
Right.
in your identity as just being a professional, right? So, Caitlin, if you ran the world, and I think maybe after this, I think maybe you do, and had supreme power, what's the first change you'd make?
I think that's such a hard question to answer, and I think that it's situational almost, right? I mean, there are instances when I would say world peace. Like right at this moment, that's kind of what comes to mind. It feels like a beauty pageant answer, but you know, things that you would change, you know, sometimes I think to myself, I wish there was people were more just forgiving, right? Because
Hmm.
nobody's perfect and everybody makes mistakes, and that's one of the things that I really try to emulate for my kids, right? Is that there's this level of self-acceptance, right? And if you can accept yourself, you can accept others, and trying to model that and teach that. But I could probably come up with 15 things that would all battle for that number one spot of what really should be changed. So it's a hard question to answer.
Well, here's an easier one. What brings you joy?
I am a very simple person. The things that bring me joy are really, it's totally cliche, but just being with my family. I love to cook. I would not say that I am an excellent cook. You know, there are times when I really knock it out of the park and everybody's kind of looking around the table nodding like she crushed it. But there are plenty of times when I do not knock it out of the park and it totally flops, which again is a great opportunity to teach self acceptance, right? But I love being in the kitchen with my girls. They love to cook. And so, you know, things like that, having a nice glass of wine after my kids go to bed and just catching up with my husband. I love that. We're boaters. So anytime I can be on the water, that is a high priority. But those are the kind of things that I think I was thinking about, you know, my mom has this expression. She says, "You got to have your happy tank filled up." And it's silly and childish, but that's what she always says. About my kids, their happy tank is full, or her happy tank is full. And to me, I think that, you know, identifying those things as sources of joy and then spending time doing those things fills me up
Hmm.
and allows me to be sort of, you describe me as enthusiastic, or other people have said, you know, I have a lot of positive energy. I think that
Totally.
being able to, and I don't even know that I would think cooking in the kitchen with my daughters is really self-care, but pursuing those moments of joy, I think really does allow you to share that with other people, you know? And so for me, those are the simple things that I gravitate towards, that I want to do.
That's great. It's interesting. I consider cooking therapy. Um,
Mhm.
I need to cut back on
Yeah.
the eating of all the food part, but nonetheless, cooking for me and being in the kitchen is for some reason so therapeutic. So, and
Yeah.
like you, it does, right, Barbara?
Oh,
It
totally.
just, gives me such joy. So I totally hear what you're saying, Caitlin. So I'm going to shift gears for a moment. One of the things that Barbara and I talk about just about every week and mention at just about every women's forum program that we host is a story that you told us several years ago that I think we were asking about, how you and your husband or you and your family invest in your financial future. And one of the things that you told us is that every year you and your husband outsource the kids to your parents or in laws, and that you take a personal annual meeting weekend, the same weekend every year, and you go off and you talk about things such as, how you're doing as parents, how you're doing as leaders in the community, how you're doing in your professional lives and in your finances. And that so resonated with us because it's so rare that women invest that time in relationships and in their family and just in their marriage, so to speak. And so I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about that. What inspired it? And also, how has that process helped you build your financial resilience?
So that process started with a fair amount of pushback from my husband, I want to be clear. After I went to a prior firm's annual meeting, basically, where there was lots of speakers and vision casting and talk about financials and talk about professional development and all of these things that were going to create synergies and success for that year. And I left feeling super energized and excited. And I came home and I thought, gosh, most of the clients that I represent are businesses which do something very similar, right? Every single year they have this meeting where they get together and they look at the books, and maybe they have to do it because, their organizational documents require them to do it, whatever. They go, they talk about the money, they talk about the goals, and they kind of set their trajectory for
Mhm.
the coming year.
Mhm.
And so I thought, and this was at a time when I was still paying off my student loans, we had young children, and trying to juggle that while building a career, I sort of felt like I need a list. I don't know if you're a list person, but I'm a list person. And I felt like things were kind of unraveling. And I thought if I just put together a list and we talk about it, I might be able to get him to agree to a budget. And so I convinced him to do this because he thought it was kind of a ridiculous idea at the time. And it does seem a little, it's a little corny. Um, but I was like, well, we'll stay at this great hotel. I'll take a day off of work, right? I'm making concessions up front. I will take a day off of work. I will not answer emails on my phone. And you will have my undivided attention. We'll sit at the beach. We'll drink mimosas. It's going to be great. And we won't talk about money all day. I promise. Right. So, like my sales pitch, you can hear it, right? I've had to do it a couple of times. And we went. And the first year, I think that he and I both realized very quickly that it was actually very productive. So
That's
I
great.
have all my statements with me, right? I've got our bank account statement, our investment account statement, the balance on my student loans, the budget of like how much he was spending on golf or whatever, and then put together sort of the facts and figures. And we looked at it, we talked about it, and we made certain agreements for how we were going to handle money for that year, right? We want to allocate this much to that and this much to that. And we'd like to have, my student loans paid off by this time, things like that, right? And it's kind of morphed as we've progressed. I think we started doing that 5 or 6 years ago. It's morphed a little bit, right? Because our investment opportunities have changed. We paid
Mhm.
off the student loans. We had another child. Oh, do we have another child? I guess she was already born when we first started doing it. But the process has continued, right? And I think that it's still important to us because it is sort of like our annual alignment, almost like your checkup, right? We
Mhm.
go, we talk about the kids. There's more discussions about the kids now than there were before because they're older. They're
Mhm.
in elementary school and their
Right.
issues are becoming larger and more sort of social emotional, less like how do we get her to sleep through the night kind of stuff.
Right.
And so we spend more time talking about that. But I still think that it's critical to not just get away. I always encourage all my friends that are sort of first time parents to go away with their spouses without their children because I think that that's really important. But to go away and carve out that time. And for us, it's like an hour, 2 hours tops, where we just focus on talking about those things. And then when we're done, we're hanging out. We're at the pool, we're having a mimosa, we're doing what we're
So
doing.
it seems to me what I hear is that you believe in and understand the value of having transparent and candid conversations about your money and about your finances and your financial goals. Is that accurate?
That's totally accurate. And I recognize that my approach to money, and I realized this right when my husband and I first got married, that my approach to money was different than his, right? I'm uber conservative when it comes to money. And he is not uber conservative. I wouldn't say he's crazy, but he's just not that far on the spectrum as I am. And so making sure that we're aligned, which tends to be me kind of flexing a little bit and him coming a little bit over more towards my side, right? We kind of meet in the middle, but just aligning where we're at and what our perspective is on money and what concessions we're going to make, right? Because
Right.
there is a certain amount of meeting in the middle. But I think that's absolutely right. I think the transparency piece, going back to the beginning of the discussion, I think it does come from that self-awareness,
Hmm.
right? I've got to know myself well enough to say, I'm a little conservative with money, right?
Hmm.
I would prefer not to buy that than to buy it, right? And I will get less enjoyment out of it if I don't get a deal on it, right? And so just knowing that about me and being able to then communicate that to him so that he can manage that, and even saying it, right? It helps you to manage yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. It's helped me a lot, certainly in my current relationship. Boy, once we started talking more dynamically about money and just coming clean with some of our challenges, internally, it helped us then talk about how that shows up in our life together. And also, and part of that approach with a partner, and Caitlin, I love this about your approach on that weekend, which, by the way, we describe as a best practice in all of our programs to women.
Really?
It
I
Oh,
love
yeah,
that.
yes,
all
That's
the
so
is
time.
funny.
because it's all. I mean, that's what money is, right? Money is about what are we doing to make sure that we can fund and live the life we want to live, and
Mhm.
happiness and success isn't just about the balance in the investment account and the bank account. It's about how we're doing as a couple, as a
Mhm.
family. And when you lose track of that, you end up, maybe not achieving all those dreams that you have in your life. It helps really maintain that alignment so much more effectively. And it helps really, again, keep that harmony of life and money and
Mhm.
where we're headed and a compass in such a great way. So we so appreciate that
Yeah.
inspiration that you've offered us.
It's really validating to hear you say that, Barbara, because I have been sort of closeted about the fact that I've done this because some of the people that I've told it to kind of give me a look like, really? That's
Well, and
a little weird.
I think that's probably because people realize that they should be talking about money with their partner or their spouse because it's one of the biggest stressors in relationships. And
Mhm.
if you avoid it, it just kind of compounds. So, I mean,
Mhm.
we talk about it to Barbara's point. And my point earlier is we talk about it all the time. It truly is one of our best practices for people
Hmm.
to invest that time in themselves, and to have those conversations. So that was a key takeaway for all of us from the day we met you.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, Caitlin, I love the fact that we know another couple, and it's their second marriage. He's in his 70s, she's in his 60s, and they do the same thing, not the full weekend, but twice a year.
You're
They have a
kidding.
meeting day
Hmm.
and they talk about the relationship and they talk about money because, as you can imagine, they've established their own money, their own
Mhm.
families outside of each other. So it's a very different dynamic, but equally as important.
That's great. Sounds
Yeah.
like it's becoming a trend. If there's two of us, it's a trend.
There you go. Oh, I think Nancy,
Oh,
3,
I think we're
4, the 4 of yeah, no,
totally a
we're
trend.
yeah. And we've told so many women, I think it was an aha moment. It's so easy and it's so important, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So, Caitlin, any other words of wisdom you'd like to share with us today?
I don't think I have any general words of wisdom. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak to both of you and share some of the things that make me tick, and to really kind of talk about what how I have developed in the last few years, because I really see all of us as being on a journey. We're all on our own journey, and I think that it takes us different places and different directions, and all of that's wonderful. So I think it's great to be able to share perspectives from different people who've gone through different things and learned different things. I always love talking to the two of you because I always pick up lots of good best practices and other tidbits and things that I can implement in my daily life.